Hi, I'm Emily and welcome to the Pepper Knits Knitting Podcast. I am a knitter based in Perth in Western Australia, and thank you for joining me for episode 18. So before we jump into this podcast / vlog, I wanted to share a quick update on where my whips are up to at the moment and how much progress I've made since the last episode. I am wearing my new Woollen polo, which I finished and over-dyed in my last episode, and I'm super happy with how this one came out. This is a pattern by Rebecca Clout from the Crochet. This is the 4-ply version, obviously with the polo collar. There is also a DK weight version of this pattern, and you can knit it with a crew neck as well. Just quickly, if you haven't seen my previous episodes talking about this, I made one smallish modification in that I shortened the front yoke panels here just so I could get a better fit for my body, and I'm really glad I did that because I feel like this version fits me really well. I knit it in the first size in a, I think 100% cotton yarn that I found in the op shop, and I ended up over dyeing it because it was a really bright white color that had bits of dirt all over it, so I ended up over dyeing it this really nice brown color. Okay, so let's get into my works in progress. I only have 2 whips on the needles at the moment, which is fine. I'm quite enjoying having a bit more focused knitting time on each of these. The first whip that I didn't actually work on at all in the last episode, and I don't think these even made an appearance, but they are the Saskie socks that I am knitting for my cousins. So I'm knitting 2 pairs of Saskie socks, and these were requested at the beginning of the year. It just took me a while to figure out what yarn I wanted to use and then get the yarn and actually slot them into my knitting projects to get them on the needles, and they have been on the needles for quite a while now. So I first of all knit 1 brown sock, and then I have recently also finished 1 blue sock. This one has come out significantly tighter and smaller than the brown one, and I think in my last episode I said, oh well, I'm just gonna leave it. But to be honest, I struggle to get these on comfortably on my own feet, and I do have pretty narrow feet and ankles, so I can imagine someone with a more average sized foot and leg would probably find this impossible to get on. The fit on this one is definitely a lot better, so I think what's gonna end up happening is I will probably frog this sock and have to knit it again. I was on a bit of a roll after I finished, especially my Maria sweater, because that one was also giving me a bit of trouble with gauge and things on the sleeve, but I managed to sit down and actually finish that project as well in the last episode. So I was feeling like I was on a bit of a roll, and I actually managed to knit like half of another brown sock. I had originally cast on the second blue sock, and I was going to just knit it just as tight, but thinking about it, that's probably not the best decision. There's honestly no rush for these to get done. There's no actual formal deadline, but because they have been on the needles for a while and I am struggling to motivate myself to knit on them a little bit, I think I'm going to aim to have them finished and sent off by Christmas. I think these will be a really nice Christmas gift. So as you can see, I am knitting these inside out. Someone left a really helpful comment on one of my previous videos. I was complaining about how knitting magic loop colorwork, you can kind of see a loose stitch where the stitches split on the needles, and I really didn't like how it looked, and I was really struggling to tension the yarn like around the side of the sock like this. But honestly, doing it inside out has completely changed how I feel about knitting colorwork on magic loop. So this was the first sock that I tried that technique on, and you can kind of see a bit of a ladder here, especially on this type of colorwork where there was 1 stitch right at the beginning that was in the contrast color. It's not perfect, but it was definitely an improvement on how I was knitting colorwork before. But I feel like now I've had some practice, this one is turning out really well. So I am so grateful for that person to leave that suggestion, because yeah, it has made my life so much easier. So I am about halfway through the colorwork on the foot of this second brown sock. This is a pattern by the Petite knitter as well, which I don't think I mentioned, and the yarn that I'm using is this Opal 4-ply sock yarn, which I'm really loving for socks. This is the second time I've used it for colorwork socks, and I accidentally managed to put one of the socks that I've knit before in this yarn through a pretty warm wash on the washing machine and it came out completely fine. That was a good test that this yarn can definitely be machine washed. So the other work in progress I have on the needles is my Semper Cardigan V-neck, which is designed by Sophie from the Knit Purl Girl. I am knitting it in Knitting for Olive Merino and Soft Silk Mohair in Dusty Artichoke. I have made pretty good progress on this cardigan so far. It's been super enjoyable to be working on this with this yarn combination. I am a little bit over halfway through on the body and then I've put it on pause just to work the sleeves, just to have something a little bit different. My hands were starting to get a little bit sore from doing all of those longer purl rows, so I thought I would change it up and knit one of the sleeves. I'm about halfway through the first sleeve and I only started this yesterday, so I'm making very quick progress. I love knitting on sleeves. I find that the body is where I can slow down my progress a little bit, but especially when it's a tapered sleeve with decreases, I just feel like it goes by really quickly and I really enjoy working on them, especially when I can be using small circumference needles like this. I found these needles in an op shop for $1 and I really like working on these small 40cm circumference needles for sleeves. They are just pretty cheap ones with a plastic cord, but honestly they work just fine, especially when I'm using a really nice yarn combination like this. This is not the right top to be trying on a cardigan with, but I'm really liking how it's fitting so far. It's just a really nice classic cardigan that I think will pair really well with a lot of outfits and just be really easy to throw on. So I'm probably about halfway through this sleeve and yeah, about halfway through the body as well. It has been so nice to have this simple stockinette project on the needles and yeah, the fit is going really well. So especially on the sleeves, I have been having a lot of issues with sleeves on my projects lately. This one is fitting me exactly how I want it to, so it's been really nice to just be able to knit a project as the pattern is written and not have to worry about my gauge or having to make alterations to how I'm knitting it. I don't think I'm going to run out of yarn, definitely not if I go with the ribbed button band, but as I've said, I do really want to put a double knit button band on this, so fingers crossed we have enough yarn to do that. So for the moment I am quite enjoying just having these two projects on the needles. I do have a few more projects lined up that I already have the yarn and I've already swatched for, so they're basically ready to cast on whenever I want to. But yeah, I think for now I'm pretty happy just working on these two projects. I do have a gift knit that I have been asked to make for someone for Christmas, so I have plenty of time, there's no rush, but I am thinking about going and picking up the yarn for it today just so I have it in stash and I am ready to cast those on whenever I feel like it as well. I do think the recipient watches the podcast, so I probably won't share who they're for or the process of knitting them, but I might share what yarn I end up getting. The plan for today is to go into Fremantle and pop into Yarns on Collie and see what sock yarn options they have in there. I had a quick look online and I think there is something that I would like to get, but I'll just have to see what options are available today. It is a really nice day outside, so hopefully it's not going to be too busy. Last weekend when I went into Fremantle, it was almost impossible to find parking. It was so busy, but I do like to try and get myself out of the house at least once a day, especially over the weekends when we have nice weather like it is today. So hopefully it's not too busy and I regret doing that, but I might have a little walk around and just enjoy being outside. Just as I thought, it is so busy, but it is a really nice day. So let's go for a little walk, enjoy the sun, and maybe buy some yarn. I ended up getting this skein of sock yarn. I don't think I mentioned, but the gift will be a pair of socks. It's this Chaska Sky 4-ply yarn, which I've been wanting to try for ages. Every time I go in there, I look at it and feel it. It's really soft, 75% superwash merino and 25% nylon, and I was instructed to get pinky purple colors like this, and I think this will have a really fun striping pattern. On my little stroll, I did stumble across a agricultural market that they were holding in the park, and I had a quick look around. There was someone shearing a merino sheep in the middle of the park, which was very random. I only caught the end of it, but it was a very cute sheep and it looked actually really good at the end, so that was very interesting to watch. Every time I come into Fremantle, I see some bizarre situation that I didn't think I would see. It's a very eclectic area in Perth, but I really love coming in here. Weekend. I made some bread. It wasn't the best loaf I've ever made. I think I didn't leave it to proof long enough, but I'm having some with some sriracha hummus as my morning snack, and it still tastes pretty good. I also got a good amount of knitting done. I have finished the first sleeve on my Semper Cardigan V-neck. I was considering lengthening the ribbing because there isn't a huge amount of ribbing on this, but I really want this to be a very classic staple cardigan that will go with everything. I think having the shorter ribbing does make it a little bit more versatile. I also managed to finish the second sock in the brown pair of these Saskie socks, and that felt really good to get this one on and off the needles in basically a few days. The colorwork on the leg I find goes by really quickly, and I really enjoy working all of these colorwork charts. It's definitely the foot where I feel like I really have to motivate myself to keep going on it, and I really try and do the toe and the afterthought heel like consecutively after each other. I really try not to put it down too much in between putting it in the heel especially, otherwise I know it will be harder for me to pick it up later on. But these ones have come out pretty much the same size, so I'm pretty confident now that I know what tension I need to be able to get these socks to fit. So I did go ahead and pretty much straight away cast on another blue sock. I've just finished the first part of the colorwork chart and done the moons and started working the little rabbit heads. And I feel like this sock is coming out a little bit tighter, so it's making me think maybe the blue colorway in this yarn is slightly thinner than the brown. I am really trying hard to keep my tension really loose so I don't end up with another really tight sock. But now that I've got one pair, I feel like I've got a little bit more steam to go ahead and finish the second pair. So I think I'm going to try and focus mainly on this whilst I'm still interested in it, and then at least I have my Semper cardigan and I can go back to that if I just want something a little bit more plain to work on. I'm debating whether I pick up the second sleeve on the cardigan or go back to working on the body. I think I might just pick up the second sleeve and finish that off. For now, I think I'm going to try and focus on finishing these socks. Because I bought that other sock yarn skein over the weekend, I really want to see how the self-striping pattern works up. But I am really going to try and finish these socks before I cast on another pair of socks, because I know that will take away my focus on these. And yeah, I do really want to try and get these ones finished sooner rather than later. Good morning, it is Saturday and I want to talk about my summer knits. The weather has been warming up quite a bit over the past week and I feel like I'm starting to reach for my summer knits, but there are certain things about some of these that just stop me from wearing them. I was going through some of these this morning and thinking about what I wanted to do with them, and I thought it would be interesting to share that with you. So I'm currently wearing the first Tulsa tee that I knit, and it is the DK weight version. This did accidentally make it into the washing machine and it has felted the brown stripes of the BC guard. I don't really know what I was thinking. I think it just snuck in there somehow. The fabric has overall shrunk quite a bit. It is definitely a lot tighter fitting than it used to be and way shorter than it was. It also just feels too small, like it's kind of bunching up around here. There is actually some elastic in this neckline. I'm gonna take out the elastic and see if that helps anything. This is probably the worst way to be doing this. Okay, that has actually helped more than I thought it would, to be honest. The length is definitely a bit too much on the crop side for me to comfortably wear. I thought I had more of this yarn, but I've had a quick look at my stash and I couldn't see it straight away. But I don't know how much I want to do that. I feel like some of the dye of the brown has leached into the main color. I just feel like it looks a little bit more brown than it used to. And I can definitely tell the brown stripes have faded a little bit. But yeah, I just don't feel like I'm going to be wearing this as much anymore now it's a bit shrunk. So I think I'm going to keep it in my wardrobe for the summer and just see how much I reach for it. I do have another Tulsa tee that I want to try on. And this one is in Knitting for Olive Pure Silk and it's the fingering weight version. And as soon as I finished this, I kind of thought, this is probably on the smaller side. Probably should have knit a size up. Now that it's on, I think the sizing is actually quite good. Maybe I could do with slightly longer sleeves to avoid this from happening, but that's an easy fix. I do have quite a bit of this yarn left over and potentially add a little bit of length. I feel like it's just a tiny bit short. Now I have this on, I think I like it more than I thought I would. I have two more summer tees. They are both sea salt tees. This one is the first one that I made. This is knit in BC Garn Biobalance and I used the scraps left over from this in that DK weight Tulsa tee. And this yarn has faded so much over time. I think it's just overwash and wear and probably drying in sunlight doesn't really help either, which is such a shame because I really liked the original color. It just has a bit of a weird like green undertone to it. And it's probably partly my fault because I have left it in the sun to dry. I have a feeling at some point I washed this with something green and the dye leached into it. And now that it's been faded by the sun, the green is way more obvious, especially on the front. I don't know how well you can see, but the front has like this weird green undertone and the back is a little bit more brown. It's such a shame because once I'd finished this, I was getting so much wear out of it. And I just feel like now I'm not as in love with it as when I first finished it. So I'm gonna have to decide what to do with this. Maybe I could over dye it, especially now I have that leftover brown dye from my Lunan. Maybe that will be my next dyeing project. So I don't know, let me know your thoughts on this. If I compare the inside of this t-shirt to the outside, you can really see what's happened to the dye in this yarn. This is the other sea salt tee that I have. So I've knit both of my sea salt tees in the second size. The fit on the brown one is absolutely perfect. I really love how it fits. I knit this one in a slightly thicker yarn, and this is also, I think it's 90% cotton, 10% cashmere, and just over time it has stretched out a lot more than I was anticipating it to. So when I had first finished this, I really loved the fit of it, but I just think over time with wash and wear, it has grown a lot more than I thought it would. And I just feel like the fit of this at the moment is just not exactly how I want it to fit. I know my mum has been asking me for another one for so long. I did ask her if she would like this one and she said yes, but this one will be going to my mum. It might be a little bit cropped for her. I think I'll just get her to try it on, and I have leftovers of this yarn as well, so I can always go back and add in a few inches of length on the body if she would prefer that. The rest of my summer knits are camisoles, and I have 2 of these 9pm tanks. I did knit these like a year apart from each other, so even though I used the same stitch count and pattern basically, my gauge on this one was much looser, so it is a tiny little bit bigger. It probably fits with basically no ease, whereas this brown one, my gauge is quite tight on it, so it does have a little bit of negative ease, but I really love wearing both of them, so they will definitely be staying for this summer. I know I'll get a lot of wear out of both of these. Another camisole I have is this Lily tank top. I test knit this one for Along Avec Anna, and I use their yarn, which is 100% merino. Looking back, doing merino tank tops like this is not really the best decision for me. I just feel like it's always too warm or too cold to be wearing this, but I think my solution for that will be to start wearing it under this linen shirt that I have. I definitely find myself wearing my knit tank tops and camisoles a lot more with this shirt over it. I'm not sure what I would do with this yarn if I frogged it, so I think I'm going to hang on to it and just see if I end up wearing it. The next summer knit is my mini mock neck tank. Again, something I made in 100% wool, and I really like this. I have actually worn it a few times already this year. I definitely prefer how much more coverage this has, especially over the chest, and having slightly wider straps on it as well. This is also freshly washed, so now it smells really good, and I'm looking forward to getting a bit more wear out of this. I'd love to knit another one of these, maybe in the Knitting for Olive Cotton Merino. And my last summer knit is another one of Jessie May Designs patterns, and this is the Summer Secret Crop, which I have knit quite a few years ago now, and I knit it in a 50-gram skein from Dyeing to Knit, which is a local hand dyer. It's knit in a sock yarn, so again, it is mostly wool with a bit of nylon in there, but I really love this. I think it's so cute. It's really comfortable. I did have to modify the pattern quite a bit to use a fingering weight yarn. I honestly thought when I finished this that I would mostly wear it under sweaters in winter. I found I didn't actually reach for it at all over the past winter, and I do wear this a lot more in transitional weather, especially now I have this shirt. Again, maybe this will be something I knit another one out of in a more summery fibre to have a cooler weather and a warmer weather version. I know most of you are not in the southern hemisphere and aren't going into summer, but I feel like it can still be helpful to do a little stock take of the knits that you have going into the next season. I have made some pretty good progress on my 2 whips this week as well. My Semper Cardigan has both sleeves finished now, and I'm just back on the body. I don't have too much more to go. I measured and I have about 9 centimeters of the stockinette left to do before I can add the bottom ribbing. I feel like I have just started this and I'm almost finished with it. It's been so nice to have a project like this where nothing seems to be going wrong. I mean, yet there is potential for things to still go wrong when I get to the button band. This is all the yarn that I have left from what I frogged in my no frills sweater. So I have this plus 1 ball each of the Mohair and the Merino. I have a feeling this should be plenty to finish off the body, but I'm now getting a little bit doubtful about the double knit button band. I'm fairly confident that I'll have enough definitely to do the ribbed button band, but I do think that a double knit button band will take up significantly more yarn, so it is making me think that maybe I will just have to stick to the pattern. I don't have to decide that right now. I'm quite happy still working on the body of this. And my Saskie socks, this is the last one that is on the needles, and it feels like this has been going on for ages. So I have finished all of the colour work on the leg, and I'm just up to the point now where I will add in the scrap yarn for the afterthought heel, and then all I have left to do is the foot, the toe, and the afterthought heel. And then I can finally block all of these socks and send them off. I am in a pretty good place with both of these projects. It gets really exciting at this point of a project where it is all coming together and you feel like you can almost see the finish line and have the finished piece ready to wear. Look what is finished. I have 2 pairs of Saskie socks done. These I have all the ends woven in, they've been blocked, they're dry, they are ready for their new home, and I'm so happy that these are finished. I'm slightly concerned that they might be a tiny bit too long in the foot, but I feel like it's better to err on the side of slightly bigger socks than ones that are too tight and not wearable. If they do end up being too big, I suppose they could be worn over other socks as well, just as an extra layer to keep their feet nice and toasty. But yes, over the weekend I got a lot of knitting time in, so I managed to finish the second one on the blue sock. I was really determined to get these off the needles, so I sat down here in this chair, had a lot of podcasts going, and managed to get through the whole of the foot, and then did the toe and the heel that same evening. So it felt really nice that by the end of the weekend I had these gifts ready to go. Because I had knit this first blue sock at quite a tight gauge, I was going to frog it to have enough yarn for the other ones. I didn't end up needing to do that. I had enough yarn to finish both the socks, but it does mean that now I have this much left, and I did weigh it and I should have enough yarn to knit a second sock with inversing the colors. So because this did take quite a bit of effort and I can get it onto my foot just fine, I think I'm going to put this aside. It won't get frogged, and instead it will have an inverse sock as its pair. I'm definitely not ready to cast that on just yet. I feel like I have knit way too many Saskie socks and I'm honestly not really enjoying it right now, so I'm just going to leave this one aside with the rest of this yarn, so when I do feel like having another colourwork sock on the go, I have just one left to knit and then I'll have a finished pair for myself. You might have already noticed I'm wearing my Semper Cardigan V-neck. Like I said, I had so much knitting time over the weekend, which was really nice. I managed to finish off the body on this. Last night and this morning I added the ribbed button band and have just bound it off and woven in all of the ends. When I frogged this yarn from the sweater it was previously knit into, I did just wind everything into bigger cakes. So it meant that I had some random ends in there where I wasn't expecting them to be. So it did mean that I had lots of ends to weave in first of all, and also some of them are like in the middle of the back, which you can kind of notice, but I don't think it's that bad. And I wasn't about to rip out half a row when I was knitting to be able to join the new bit of the yarn at the start of a row. I don't really care that much and I don't think it's hugely noticeable. So in the end I did end up going for the ribbed button band instead of trying to add a double knit button band. Part of why I was enjoying working on this so much was because I was just knitting away and it was really simple and I didn't have any issues, and it was so nice to just follow the pattern word for word and not have to make up any of my own modifications. This is all the yarn I have remaining from those main balls that I had for this project. To be honest, I just wasn't really in the mood to knit half a double knit button band and then potentially have to frog it out if I didn't have enough yarn. I did make one very small modification. The pattern instructs you to bind off the button band in pattern, but I did do the tubular bind off instead, which did add a little bit of extra work and took a little bit of extra time, but I think it was worth it. I prefer how this looks rather than having like a solid line of bound off stitches all the way around the edge. It does mean that it is slightly cinching it in and pulling it up, but this hasn't been blocked yet, so I'm fairly confident that this will relax a lot once it's blocked. This pattern uses the afterthought buttonhole method to add in the buttonholes, which I have never tried before, so I'm very intrigued to see how that's done. I know it does involve a crochet hook, so I'm excited to try out that technique. In terms of buttons, I've had a look through my stash and I have come up with two options. The pattern calls for 10mm buttons, which is great because that is mainly what I have in my stash. The first option for buttons are these small plastic pearlescent buttons that have like a silvery detail around the edge. I think this will definitely dress up the cardigan a little bit, which I don't really mind, but I do want this to be a versatile piece. So my second option are these small plastic light grey buttons. These buttons are a tiny bit bigger, but I feel like it will make the cardigan a lot more casual than the pearlescent ones. I think I'm just going to go ahead and block this so then I can add in the buttonholes and then decide after this. And not only did I get a lot of knitting time over the weekend, I also managed to squeeze in some crochet, which is very unusual for me. I don't even remember the last time I picked up my crochet hooks to actually crochet a project, like not just for a provisional cast on. I have definitely been knitfluenced by Instagram, and also one of my friends has been knitting hanging ornaments for Christmas, and it's just got me feeling really festive. I think as well because the weather here is warming up, that means that summer's coming, and now I associate that warm summery weather with Christmas. So I have been feeling a little bit festive and ended up crocheting these really cute little stars. I made 2 white ones, and these are both made in Drops Baby Merino held double, which was just a scrap that I had sitting in my stash, and now that whole scrap has been used up. I honestly forgot how much yarn crochet uses. It is ridiculous compared to knitting. I feel like crochet just chews through the yarn that you have. Saying that, it did mean that I got to use up that whole scrap that had been sitting in my stash. I then made 2 of these pink ones out of some acrylic that I have had for honestly years at this point. I don't really enjoy knitting with acrylic yarn, but I find crocheting with it is actually quite enjoyable. I ended up just steam blocking these with my iron on a towel that I had laid out on the floor, and I think it kind of worked. I don't really think wet blocking acrylic really works. I think you definitely need the heat from steam for it to actually block out, but I definitely think it helped make these a little bit pointier and look less like a flower and more like a star. I probably could have wet blocked these because it is 100% merino, but whilst I had the iron out, I just steam blocked them. My plan is to attach some ribbon to these so they can be hung up on the Christmas tree. I was originally going to like crochet a chain, but I didn't really like how that was looking. I'm not sure if I will crochet any more ornaments. It was really fun to pick up my hook and definitely tested my brain out a lot. I was surprised at how hard I found it to remember the stitches and the muscle memory as well to do it, but by the time I finished 4, I felt like I had gotten back into the groove of it. So I might crochet a few more, but I have been saving some knitting patterns in a Ravelry bundle, which I can leave the link to as well. Most of them at the moment are free hanging ornament patterns, so I'll have a look through and maybe have a look through my scraps as well, and potentially start knitting a few ornaments through the rest of the month and into December. So now I have wrapped up the Saskie socks and finished all of the knitting on my Semper Cardigan. I have no projects on my needles, which feels very weird. That hasn't been the case for quite a long time now, but that does mean it is an exciting time to be able to cast on some new projects. I have a few options for what I'm going to cast on next. All of these projects will eventually get onto the needles, but I'm not sure what I want to pick up next. Option 1 is the Sweet Shop blanket. I have a big tote bag here with 3 bowls of the Bendigo Woollen Mills Luxury 8-ply, and I have bought this with the intention of using it as the main colour for my Sweet Shop blanket. On the subject of Bendigo Woollen Mills, a lovely viewer reached out to me after my last video, and I was talking about Australian wool, and I said I like using Bendigo Woollen Mills, but I think most of it is superwash. Apparently superwash treatment is something that has to be declared on a yarn label, which I actually didn't know. I assumed just because this says it can be machine washed that makes it superwash. And in my experience with using it, it behaves very similarly to a superwash yarn in that it grows quite a lot and it is super soft as well. But it must just be a different process that they use to achieve those properties that isn't necessarily a superwash treatment. So thank you to that lovely person for reaching out to correct me on that. It was very interesting to learn. So I have a few little scraps in here that I'm thinking potentially will go into the Sweet Shop blanket. I don't really have a set color scheme that I want to go for this blanket, so I think I need to do a little bit of planning before I jump into this and figure out which scraps I'll have enough of. Most of these are fingering weight, but the pattern calls for a fingering weight held double or obviously an 8-ply like the main color that I have. The other projects that I have lined up are all garments. The one that I'm most leaning towards casting on is my boyfriend's Northland sweater. He has been hinting at me for the past couple of weeks, asking me how his sweater is going, and I have to keep telling him it's not even on the needles yet. So I am feeling a bit more motivated and excited to get started on that, just because I know he's looking forward to having it. I already have the pattern purchased and I've done all of the maths to account for my gauge difference. So this will be a really simple cast on that I can get started on right away. So I am kind of leaning towards casting this one on first. The next thing I think that I'm going to cast on will be my cognac cardigan. I was really eager to cast this on, but because I have just finished a cardigan, I think getting started on a sweater and then maybe going back to a cardigan will make it feel a little bit more exciting. And again, I have swatched for this, and I think you've already seen this swatch, but I love this fabric so much. It's super soft, and I love how the colors look together with the subtle pink halo. I think it's going to be really pretty. I'm really excited to have this one on the needles. I love how the cognac sweater and cardigan are constructed. It's a really fun knit, and also I am super excited to have a pink fluffy cardigan in my wardrobe. The last project I have lined up is another summer knit, and if you've been watching for a while, you might remember these shorts that I cast on kind of towards the end of last summer. I got a fairly decent amount of the way through them, and this yarn is super soft. It is this 100% eucalyptus yarn. Oh, it's 97% eucalyptus and 3% other wood fibers, and there's really bright hot pink color. This yarn is 165 meters per 100 grams. I only have 200 grams, so it's not a huge amount. As you can see, these are not even on the needles at the moment, but I just don't think I'll have enough yarn for these to be a good length, so that's why this is getting scrapped. I have a teeny tiny little swatch here where I've just been playing around with potential options for this yarn. I've been having a look on Ravelry, and there is a Petite knit tank top that I have been considering using this yarn for. I think it's the Alice top, and I should be able to get gauged with this yarn. Or I was having a look through the patterns I already have in my library, and I do have the Tolster tank as well, which has kind of a similar silhouette to the Alice top by Petite knit. At least one of them does, with the v-neck and the slightly wider straps. Or having a look at my summer knits previously, I get so much wear out of those 9 PM tanks that have the square neckline. So maybe I end up knitting the square neck Tolster tank instead. So that's the plan for this yarn. I will need to frog this and probably rewind all of the yarn because it's looking pretty messy at the moment. So makes me think that this is not the immediate cast on, but now that I've spoken about it and gotten my ideas out there, I am a bit more excited to get started on this. So I think I am pretty settled. I'm going to cast on the Northland sweater next, and then maybe in the meantime I'll find some free time to wind up the pink yarn and maybe get started on my next summer knit for this year. I am going to wrap up this episode of the podcast here. I have especially loved working on this Semper Cardigan v-neck. It has gone by so smoothly, and I feel like it's been a while since I've had a garment project go by this quickly and easily and not had to rip back a lot of times and make my own modifications. I'm also finding this to be very comfortable to wear even against skin. I've been wearing this for about half an hour now, and usually by now I would need to take off anything mohair, but I'm not finding this prickly or itchy at all, which is really surprising me. So maybe I am overcoming my mohair sensitivity. Of course, a real test would be to wear this for a whole day. I'm not sure exactly how that would go, especially if it starts to get a little bit too warm. But for now, it is super comfortable against skin. As you can see, I did go for the pearlescent buttons, and I'm really pleased with how it looks on the cardigan. I realised I didn't actually have enough of the other grey buttons anyway to put on this cardigan. Because they are a little bit smaller, I definitely needed at least 5 buttons to put onto the button band. The afterthought buttonholes were surprisingly easy to do. It was a little bit fiddly, especially because you're left with 2 loops on each buttonhole that you need to basically tack down with another piece of thread or yarn. So that bit did take a little bit more time, and it meant weaving in a lot more ends. Personally, I think it's worth it so you can determine your buttonhole placement after you have finished and blocked the cardigan. So it's definitely something I would consider doing again on future cardigans. I followed the tutorial that is linked in the pattern, and it suggested to use one of the plies from the main yarn, which I hadn't done before, but I ended up doing that, and I think it was a good way to not add extra bulk. I'm a little bit worried that it's not going to be quite strong enough to hold, especially because I also use that to sew on the buttons, but we'll see how it goes. If I need to re-sew them on with some embroidery thread or something later on, I always have that option. So the cardigan did grow a little bit more than I expected it to with blocking. So the sleeves are a little bit on the longer length, but I really like the length that they are. They feel a bit more cozy and I would rather have them a bit longer and be able to cuff them than have them too short and feel like I'm constantly yanking them down. I also shortened the body by about 3 centimeters, and I'm really glad I did that because it is now the perfect length. I definitely feel like I'm going to get a lot more wear out of this cardigan than the no frill sweater that I originally had knit this yarn into. I just think the shape and the silhouette and the overall style of the cardigan will fit a lot more easily into my wardrobe, and definitely because the yarn I think can be a little bit itchy on me, but now I'm not so sure. But I can definitely wear this over t-shirts and other things as a layering piece, so it's not directly against my skin. Whilst I was in the mood for finishing off projects and I had my needle and thread out, I did go ahead and attach ribbons onto the little crochet stars that I had made. I had these little bits of ribbon in stash from when you purchase ready to wear clothes, and they come with these little bits of ribbon to hang them up. I hate having those things in my clothes, so they always get chopped out and put into my ribbon stash. I definitely prefer how the hanging ribbon looks rather than the crochet chain. It still looks handmade, but I think it just looks a little bit more polished than a crochet chain. And just before I leave you, I did want to share a little update on my new whips. I did end up casting on the gift knit pair of socks that I bought that Chaska yarn for. I did already mention that I think the recipient watches the podcast, so I won't be showing those, and to be honest, I'm not very far through them. I don't think I've even finished the cuff yet, so there's not very much to look at. But I have been getting a good amount of work done on my boyfriend's Northland sweater. It's not really at a point where it is easy to see what's going on, but I have made pretty good progress in only one evening. It's a saddle shoulder construction, so I have finished working this saddle bit, and now I'm working on the sleeve shaping, and it's really fun to work on. I am knitting this completely off gauge just because I had this 12 ply yarn that I wanted to use with this design. So I am knitting this on 5.5mm needles to just get a comfortable gauge and a nicer feeling fabric. I really like how plump these stitches look. It's definitely a bit more of a chunkier sweater than I would normally be knitting, but because it is a men's size and my boyfriend is quite a tall person, so I think this will be a lot of knitting to get it to a good length. I'll be grateful it is a slightly chunkier knit that should go by a little bit quicker. So I am knitting the size small in the pattern, but because my gauge is quite a bit off, I should end up somewhere between the large and the extra large size in terms of measurement, and that should fit exactly how my boyfriend wants it to. He did give me a sweater that he already owns and said he wants it to fit very similarly to that one, so it should be pretty much bang on in between those sizes. Of course, I'll get him to try this on fairly frequently throughout the making process, and I think once I finish the yoke and maybe just after I split the sleeves, I will do a mid-project block just to be 100% sure that he's happy with how it's fitting and also how the fabric is feeling as well. I know he doesn't want it to be a super dense fabric. He's felt what I have knit already, and he said he really likes how it's feeling, which is great because I think even after blocking and with a few wears, it will relax and open up even more. So the Northland sweater is designed by Petite Knit, and I am knitting it in this Bendigo Woollen Mills classic 12 ply, which I have frogged from a zipper sweater that I had knit for him a couple of years back that he just didn't end up wearing, mainly because it was knit at too dense of a gauge. I have been very cautious about making sure that he is much happier with the fit and the density of the fabric of this one, so I feel like we're off to a good start. That wraps up everything I have to share for this episode. I hope you have enjoyed watching and made some good progress on your whips. As always, I would love to know what you're working on, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye!